motorcycle license or what have you, or they're changing their license because they've moved, it is a opt-out box as opposed to an opt-in box. So right now, when you're filling out your DMV paperwork, it is a opt-in box, which is often neglected because it's probably in font 6 on the right-hand corner of all of your paperwork. But instead, you're automatically opted in, so you have the option to opt out of being registered to vote. So that's the main difference. Why is it going to take till 2019? You're going to have to ask the budget office. I'm sure it has something to do with all the paperwork that they will have to put into a fire somewhere.
Yeah.
But that is the main difference between automatic voter registration and what we currently have.
Okay. Yeah, and I think there are something like 10 states and DC that have automatic voter registration, at least legislation passed at this point. I don't know how far all of them are in implementing it. Oregon's had it for a few years.
Yep.
Oregon seems way ahead of the pack in everything to do with voting. So lucky people who live in Oregon. And it looks like there's a lot of movement, at the same time that there's a lot of movement trying to sort of restrict voting rights and, purge voter rolls. There's also a lot of movement in state legislatures to try to get automatic voter registration set up. Something like 30 states have started, at least the process of trying to get legislation through.
Yeah. We hope that everyone can fall in line in the next 10 years. It's the future, right? Like, we're just talking about the future.
Yeah.
That we have more people on this earth than ever before, and it's only going to continue to grow. And we just need to continue advancing in these ways like automatic voter registration, because honestly, it cuts time, it cuts money, everything. It's the perfect tool to make sure that we have that people are accountable, but also that we could keep eyes on everybody, right? Like, if you're registered to vote, now you can also be summoned for jury duty. I mean, it's just that's the way the cookie crumbles. So not that we need any more surveillance, but it's certainly a way to make sure that everyone is accounted for in our great country.
I just want to say I voted in every election. I have never been called for jury duty.
Oh.
I'm so disappointed.
You're truly missing out. I was called for jury duty. I think they saw in my eyes that I was like I was like ready for a crime scene investigation style trial, and they were like, nope, you gotta go. Sorry, you're way too eager and hungry to be here.
Yeah, like my grandfather one time actually wrote to somebody and was like, I've never been on a jury. Can I be on a jury? Can I be called for jury duty? And like, apparently he was called for jury duty. So I need to figure out how that happens, because I've always wanted to be on a jury. I'm very enthusiastic, and yet.
They know. That's why. They just know.
They must.
They're not going to want you, Sophie.
I know.
I got as far as jury selection, and I told them where I worked, and that was it. I was out.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for being on. I'll post some links on our post about this podcast about, so all these things I referenced about, how to figure out what's going on in your state. And, if your state is thinking about automatic voter registration, start calling your state legislators, and really try to get this through, because I agree with you, Maggie. I think this is the future.
Yep, and remember, go out and vote in the primaries, March 20th, 2018, and the general election on November 6th, 2018.
All right. Thanks, Maggie.
Thank you.
Scratch is an innovative new yarn and craft supply shop located in Lebanon, New Hampshire. They're committed to providing a beautifully curated selection of yarns and supplies for knitters, as well as roving, tools, and kits for needle felters. Their shop also features embroidery, sewing, and select fine art supplies. Scratch operates with the guiding notion that makers are curious and creative and should be able to find exciting, high-quality materials to work with all in one place. Scratch is also proud to offer Yarn Club, a monthly yarn subscription box that brings you gorgeous hand-dyed yarn in nature-inspired colorways. You can find their full selection of yarns, notions, and supplies on their website at scratchmakerspace.com and on Facebook and Instagram at scratchmakerspace. Podcast listeners will receive a 15% discount with the code 2BROADS. That's TWOBROADS. Again, you can find them at scratchmakerspace.com. Hi, everybody. Sophie and I are back. This is the second segment of the podcast episode today about voting. And we have a special guest with us here. This is Anita Parsa, who runs a website called Leave Crosscheck. Hi, Anita.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yes, we're thrilled to have you here. It's probable that some of our listeners don't even know what Crosscheck is. So why don't we just jump right in and sort of fill in the gaps of their knowledge, and then we can talk some about why we might want to leave Crosscheck and what Crosscheck is doing to hurt us right now. I'll note at the beginning that we are recording this on Tuesday evening, and we have all now seen the election results that are coming in from Virginia and New Jersey, and so we are pretty ecstatic at the moment.
Yay!
Feeling good, but that doesn't mean that there's not a lot of work left to do, and that's part of why things like Leave Crosscheck are so important. So, Anita, as the expert here, can you tell us a little bit about what Crosscheck is and how it started?
Sure. So Crosscheck, the idea of Crosscheck is a good one. It is designed to help state and local election officials clean the voter rolls. So remove people who are double registered, who have moved from one state to another and don't bother to tell the previous state that they're no longer registered, and identify, to the extent that it actually happens, people who vote in two different states, which of course is illegal. Being double registered is not illegal, but double voting is. And it's designed to help state and local officials keep their rolls clean. The problem with Crosscheck is that at every step of the process, it has at least one fatal flaw. So it's a good idea. It's just a terrible way to accomplish clean voter rolls.
Yeah, and Sophie and I have both moved around a lot, and I certainly know there have been times that I've been registered in more than one state. I never bothered to unregister. I just didn't vote in the previous state anymore. Right. So, I can understand why the idea of something like this could seem appealing to state officials. So when did Crosscheck start?
So it was a piloted program, I believe, in 2005, and the first active year was 2006. And in the beginning, it was a very small, it was just 4 states, and it was developed at that time. The Secretary of State of Kansas was a man by the name of Ron Thornborough, I believe is how his name is pronounced. It has expanded since then pretty aggressively since 2011 to now include 28 states.
And so it started in Kansas. Was it mostly sort of Midwest or middle of the country states at the beginning? Do you know?
Definitely, yes. So it was just Midwest kind of border states. The idea being that the most common migration is, from Kansas across to the Missouri, across to Missouri, from Kansas to Nebraska. So that's the most obvious place to check for double registrations.
Okay. And how long has Crosscheck been on your radar? What made you start looking into it?
I probably first heard about it a little over a year ago. And what got it on my radar, I read an article, probably many people who know about Crosscheck's existence know about it because of work that Greg Palast has done. And I read an article and, he raises some very alarming concerns about Crosscheck. And I noticed, hey, I live in Kansas. I've never heard of this thing. Kansas pays for this on behalf of all 28 member states. And I don't know how much you all know about Kansas, but we're broke. And so I thought 2 things, honestly. I thought 3 things. One, is it really this bad? 2, why would any significant voter effort be in the hands of a single state and one that's pretty highly partisan? And then 3, how on earth can we afford this? Why are, we gotta fix the fact that Kansas is paying for this. And so I started digging in, and I'm sort of a techie, analytical person by nature, and so I really wanted to dig in, understand it, know all the details about what it really does and how it works and what the problems are. So I just started researching and I sent out my very first Freedom of Information Act request this year to get information and really dig in. And it's super wonky, but it's a pretty clean case against Crosscheck. And so within a very short amount of time, I thought, someone's got to do something about this. Why is no one doing something about it? And then I looked in the mirror and thought, okay, I guess I'll see what I can do.
I think there's been a lot of that going on since November of last year.
Yeah, me too.
I think so. And, it's interesting you bring that up. There are so many issues that have to do with voting, have to do with how much we trust the voting system, different types of fraud, concerns about all sorts of shenanigans. And I started looking into a few of those, and it's very overwhelming. There are many, many, many questions. And so for me, focusing on Crosscheck and really understanding and advocating against it was a very concrete, definable way that I could feel comfortable that I was doing good things with my time and not get overwhelmed by the enormity of some of these issues.
Can you tell us about what some of the fatal flaws are?
Sure. How long did you say we have? So there are three chunks of it, and there's a fatal flaw at each chunk. So the first is data collection. All 28 states send their voter files to, it's hosted on a server in Arkansas, even though Kansas is in charge of the program. So they send the data for all of their registered voters to this server. And the security is completely inadequate. We have found over the past month or two, there's been really amazing work done by the Indivisible group Indivisible Chicago is the one that's leading the charge, but it's a bunch of different segments in Illinois. And I contributed a tiny bit to that. I'll toot my own horn there. But they have discovered that the server, which Kansas has been presenting as a secure FTP server all along, is not secure. We found that the encryption passwords are emailed over plain text to the states, the encryption passwords to download the data after it's done. There are other things that I can't talk about at this point, but it might be interesting to continue to watch the news because there might be a little more coming out about some of the security issues. So both in transit and at rest, the data is not protected. The files include, for most states, the last 4 digits of the Social Security number of all of these voters, and those are not anonymized at all. In fact, I got, through one of my Freedom of Information Act requests, a segment of a file that is the output of Crosscheck, and it includes a bunch of my neighbors' Social Security number. It's for Kansas residents. I've got 945 of my friends and neighbors' SSN4 that just got sent as an attachment to another request, to an email answering a request I'd made. So data privacy is not protected. And I should have said this at the outset, but philosophically, to me, any program, any system that we have in the United States that is involved in voting should operate at a very high standard of data security and accuracy. We need to do this well. Voting is sacrosanct, and the data security for Crosscheck is way below the margin of acceptable.
That's really shocking to me. I work for a electronic medical record software company, and we can do data security really well. It's really not that hard, and so I'm sitting here very shocked that they didn't even think about some of these things.
Remember how I said Kansas pays for it? So early on, I was really in a snit about, oh my gosh, we're paying all this money for this. And the more I looked into it, I have a very strong theory